Hey guys, it's Justine here from I Should Read That, and today we are talking about my January book haul. I just did a TBR video where I talk about reading down my TBR and I talk about trying to get that number a little bit lower, and I still am coming to you with a big book haul. There's a little bit of a reason for that, which we'll go into. Whether it's justified or not, I don't know, but there is a little bit of a reason for that. All of my books have been counted in my TBR for the end of the month, and as I mentioned in my January wrap-up, that number now sits at 826 books on my TBR, which is 4 more than it was when I did that video, my TBR video, so it's gone up a little bit, but given the number of books that I did end up getting, it's actually not. I have a fair few here that I ended up reading in January. I also have some books that I have already read that I wanted physical copies of. And yeah, I did do my saving £1 per book that I read last year. I bought my books with that savings, £128. So there's a lot of stuff here. I'll go into what those specific books were for that haul. I'll talk about the stuff that I got from publishers and the stuff that I just ended up buying for myself, as well as my NetGalley books. So as per usual, I'm going to try to rattle through this pretty quickly, but if you want to know more about these books, if any of them kind of pique your interest, there are links to everything down below and you can go ahead and learn a little bit more. So in terms of the books that I received from publishers in January, I have 6 physical copies. A couple of them are quite big and a few of them are quite small. There's really no in between with this, which is quite funny. But let's get started with Orbit. So I have 2 books from Orbit this month, the first one being The Mask of Mirrors by M.A. Carrick. I talked about this in my reading vlog. I kind of failed at reading this as quickly as I thought I would. You can see where I am right now. I'm getting really close to the end, but I'm not quite there yet. This is a very slow-going book for me, but I am planning on finishing it in February, so you'll see more about it in my wrap-up. But this is based in kind of it feels like a Venetian type society, and it's quite complex and it is a little bit dense at times, but basically the main storyline that we have is we follow a girl named Ren who is posing as the long lost niece of this noble household. The daughter of that household ran away many years ago, and Ren ended up as her maid, and now she is posing as her to sort of get on the family register and basically secure her fortune for herself and for her sister, who is sort of play acting as her maid. This con is very, very sort of intricate and complex and involves a lot of intuition for dodging lies and getting out of various situations, which Ren is very, very good at. However, it appears that there is some kind of dark magic that is infiltrating the city, and Ren ends up getting caught up in the middle of it. This is really fun. I'm really, really enjoying it, which is why it's so funny to me that it is a little bit of a slower read for me. However, I just keep in mind that Empire of Sand by Tasha Suri, which is one of my absolute favorite books ever, took me 2 months to read. So 1 month is not quite so bad. So I am hoping to finish this up soon, and I will let you know my thoughts, but so far I am very much enjoying it. Then coming out in March, we have The Unbroken by C.L. Clark. This is a very buzzy book that people are talking a lot about and is going to be featured in a particular book box for the month of March. I'm really excited to get my physical, finished copy of this book. But I am hoping to read it before its publication date because this is one of my most anticipated books of the year. It looks absolutely amazing. So we basically follow 2 women on different sides of a war. One is a soldier, and I think the other is royalty. And she's trying to get her power back. Luca, who is this royal character, and she needs a turncoat, someone who's desperate enough to tiptoe between the bayonet's edge and treason and orders, and Terrain is the soldier who I think is going to be fulfilling that role. This looks really, really great. I have had some friends read it recently who have said that it's fabulous, but it's really, really impactful, especially in terms of colonization. It does not shy away from sort of the harms of colonization, and my friends at the Fantasy Inn have read this, so if they have posted up reviews of this book, I will go ahead and link them down below. If not, you should follow them anyway. They're an amazing blog. But this is one I'm really, really looking forward to. It sounds absolutely incredible, like a really, really gritty fantasy book, which is just what I absolutely love. From Solaris, coming out in March, I have One Day, All of This Will Be Yours by Adrian Tchaikovsky. I am so excited to read this book. It looks absolutely amazing. It's another one of his novellas, so it's very small, and this basically takes place after the Causality War. It's all about screwing with time travel, and our main character is the person who ended this time war after sort of time was broken. It looks really good. I'm very, very excited for this. As you guys know, he's one of my favorite science fiction authors, so this is one I'm very much looking forward to. Again, this is out in March. Then we have some books that I have already read and I talked about in my January wrap-up, so I'm just going to rattle through these super quick. So the first is Tales from the Hinterland by Melissa Albert. This came out in January, and it's basically like the companion to the Hazelwood series, which was not my favorite series in the world, but I came out of those books wanting this. This is a set of 12 very, very dark original fairy tales from the Hazelwood world, kind of what those books are like based on. And this was a really fun read. I very much enjoyed it. If you are looking for dark fairy tales that are super, super, super grim and don't necessarily always have happy endings, although that depends a little bit on your definition of a happy ending, I would very much recommend this. It was a really fun read. It's quite small. These stories are not very long. I wanted a little bit more, but I was very happy with what we got. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. Then I have The Sad Ghost Club by Lizzie Meddings. This came out in January as well, and this is basically just a snapshot of a day in the life of this particular teenage character who very obviously suffers from anxiety and depression and through social anxiety as well. They get invited to a party, and after agonizing all day about it, they decide to go, and they end up making a friend who has a lot of the same kind of troubles as them. This is lovely. It's very sweet. If you're looking for plot, there is no plot really, but if you're looking for something that's a little bit heartwarming and uplifting and showcases kind of the loneliness of mental illness, but also shows that you are very much not alone, this is perfect. I definitely recommend this for teenagers who are suffering from anxiety or depression or may think that they are. I gave this 4 out of 5 stars. And the last physical book that I received from publishers was Winterkeep. This is the 4th book in the Realm of the Graceling series by Kristen Kishore. I thought this was fine. It definitely shows that that there is a big gap between the publication of the 3rd book and this one, which is the 4th book. It's interesting to see these characters sort of revisited, and it does take place, I think, 5 years after the events of Bitterblue, which is the 3rd book. We are introduced to a new land with new magic and new characters as well. So we follow Bitterblue and Gideon, who are 2 characters from the previous series, or previous books in the series. And we also have this character named Lovisa, who is one of the residents of Winterkeep, and she is the daughter of 2 of its most powerful politicians. This goes into things like climate change. It goes into sort of sex and sort of sexual awakenings and not being ashamed of your sexuality. And it goes into sort of the complexities of family and parental relationships. This was interesting, but I don't think it kind of had the charm of the previous books. I don't think it really knew who its audience was, but I did enjoy reading it. I absolutely powered through it once I got into the story. I gave this 3 out of 5 stars. Okay, so now we're moving on to NetGalley books. I received 5 books from NetGalley. I am trying to kind of like taper off my NetGalley requesting a little bit because I have started getting some kind of headaches and stuff from reading books on a tablet. I should probably switch back to my Kindle. I don't know where my Kindle is. But I've not been requesting as many, but these are older ones that have come in. So if you have seen me bitching about my headaches and you're like, why are you requesting more NetGalley books? That is why. So the very first one is one I'm so excited for. This is A Master of Jinn by P. Jelly Clark. I absolutely love his novellas, and this is a full-length novel, so I'm very excited. I think I've read all of his novellas now, and I've run out, so I need something more, and this is going to be so good. So the sort of series that I think he's best known for is the Cairo novellas. So we have A Dead Djinn in Cairo, which is more like a novelette or short story. Then we have The Haunting of Tramcar 015, which is a novella. And now we have A Master of Djinn, which is a full-length novel. And I'm so excited because this world is amazing. It's so fun. It's so interesting, and I just absolutely love it. So this world is it's set in Cairo in 1912, but it's sort of an alternate version of Cairo because at some point in the past, someone ripped the fabric between our world and the world of the Jinn, and the Jinn have basically entered into our world, making Cairo kind of like a superpower. And it sort of created this sort of like steampunk type version of Cairo where sort of magical beings and humans live side by side. In A Dead Djinn in Cairo, that first book, we follow a female police officer named Fatima, and she sort of investigates this particular goings-on. In The Haunting of Tramcar 015, we follow a different set of characters who are investigating, paranormal crimes. In The Master of Djinn, we follow Fatima again, and I'm so excited because she's an amazing character. So I don't know a huge amount about this one, but it does take place after A Dead Djinn in Cairo, where she, casually prevents the ending of the universe, and she is still kind of considered a rookie in the police, but she has this amazing experience of doing all these amazing things. So I'm very excited for her to come back. I loved her. She was amazing, so much fun, and I have very high hopes for this book. I will stop gushing about it, but it comes out from Tor Books in May. You should absolutely read this series if you have not yet. So next up, coming out on the 13th of April, is Malice by Heather Walter. This is a Sleeping Beauty retelling, which is not something that would normally kind of catch my interest. I'm not really interested in sort of the very traditional fairy tale retellings that you get a lot in YA, but this is from the villain's point of view, it's from the evil fairy's point of view, and it's also sapphic. So I'm really interested in this. I think it's pretty basic in terms of like what it is. It's a retelling from the villain's point of view. I don't know a huge amount more than that, but I'm not really interested in learning more than that. I just want to kind of dive in because I feel like I know everything I need to know going in. This looks amazing. Again, a description is linked down below, so you can go ahead and check it out, but this is one I'm very much looking forward to. Again, I don't know if I would necessarily be interested if it didn't have that kind of twist. So this should be really interesting for me. I don't read a lot of those kind of straight up fairy tale retellings. Then coming out on the 18th of March, we have The Shadow in the Glass by J.J.A. Hardwood. This comes out from Harper Voyager. I had my wish granted on NetGalley, which like never happens for Harper Voyager. They don't seem to like me very much, but I did get this one and I'm really excited. This is also going to be the Goldsboro SFF Fellowship book, I think for March. So I'm really looking forward to that edition, but I'd like to read this before it comes out and comes through my letterbox. So this is a gothic story of wishes and curses, and it's a new dark fairy tale set in a Victorian backdrop, which like so many like little lights are going off in my head. This sounds like something I'm really gonna love. So in this book we follow a character named Ella, and once she wished for more than her life as a lowly maid. So now she's forced to work hard under the unforgiving and lecherous gaze of a man she once called her stepfather, and her only refuge are the books that she reads by candlelight that are forbidden. So one night, amongst her beloved books of far-off lands, her wishes are answered, and a fairy godmother comes to her at the stroke of midnight and grants her 7 wishes so that she can change her life however she pleases. So she's thrilled. However, every wish comes at a price and she has to decide if that price is something she's willing to pay. This sounds amazing. So this is basically like Cinderella, but like a twisted version of Cinderella. And when I say, straight up fairy tale retellings like I talked about in Malice, it's kind of like that setting of the fairy tale, and it's very much like obviously identifiably just another version of that story. This is something that feels very different. So this is something I'm very excited about because it's obviously got the influences of Cinderella, but it's something that's kind of shiny and new. This sounds amazing. I'm so excited for this book. It's got a really stunning cover, and I think the Goldsboro edition is going to be amazing, and I'm really looking forward to this. This is one I would absolutely love to read as soon as possible once I work through some of my January and February arcs, but it is sort of taunting me in the back of my head. So next up we have on the 6th of May, Sorrowland by River Solomon. I'm really looking forward to this. I've only read one book by them, and that was The Deep, which is a novella. I've never read any of their full-length novels, and I think this is going to be a really good one, but I think it's going to be pretty grim. So in this book we follow a woman named Vern, who is a black woman but has albinism, and she is hunted after she flees from the religious compound that she has been living in. And she discovers that her body is going through a metamorphosis. She is changing and she's developing these extrasensory powers. So while she's in the woods, she gives birth to twins, and she's trying to raise them outside of the influence of the outside world. I'm sure there's a better way to say that. And she realizes that there's something wrong, not with the twins, but with her. She can feel her body changing. So to understand what her body is going through, Vern must investigate the secluded religious compound that she fled, and the violent history of dehumanization, medical experimentation, and genocide that produced it. Again, this is going to be super grim, and it's going to be a very, very bleak read, but I think that this is going to be fabulous. The Deep was also a very, very grim read, but I thought it was really powerful and I really enjoyed it. So I have very high hopes for this. I think I have an Unkindness of Ghosts somewhere on my shelves as well, and that is another book by them that I would really, really like to read. Again, grim, but it sounds like it's going to be really, really moving. And last but not least, for NetGalley books is one of my most anticipated reads of the year. I did a little dance, like I think a lot of people have been doing. A lot of people are very excited about this, and I have heard early reviews that have just been absolutely fabulous. So this is She Who Became the Sun by Shelley Parker Chan. This comes out on the 22nd of July. So I think one of the reasons that people are really excited about this book is not just that it sounds fabulous and it sounds so incredibly good, but I think it's going to have some really strong Poppy War vibes. So if you are someone who has read and enjoyed those books, this is one that you should absolutely be on the lookout for. So this takes place in 1345 in China, and in a famine-stricken village, a seer shows two children their fate. So for the 8th-born son, there's greatness in his future, and for the daughter, there is nothing. So China is lying restless under harsh Mongol rule, and when a bandit raid wipes out their village, these two children must somehow survive. The boy ends up, I believe, dying, and the girl ends up taking on his identity. So she has to escape what's written in the stars as rebellion sweeps the land, or she can claim her brother's greatness and rise as high as she can dream. Apparently this is brutal. It's gonna make you weep, and I'm really excited for it. I think this is going to be an absolutely fabulous book. Super, 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 super bleak, but I think it's gonna be so, so good. I am hoping to read this well before its July publication. I tend to try to read things a little bit closer to when they come out, but I don't think I can resist for this one. Okay, so now we're going on to the books that I purchased. First, I'm going to show you the books that I bought with my pound per book savings. I had £128 saved at the end of the year, which was great. So this is what I bought with it. So I had to cancel one because it was just never in stock, which I'm really sad about. I think it's one of those books that's just going to be really hard to find in the UK, but I'm going to try to go through Portal Bookshop. We'll see if that ever ends up happening. And then I also have Across the Green Grass Fields by Shauna McGuire, which I pre-ordered with this money. That's not out yet in the UK. It comes out in February, hopefully. Hopefully I will get it soon, but we'll see. So I have a big old stack of books here. How many is this? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 books. Yeah, it's a lot. So yeah, I'm just gonna rattle through these guys, but these are all ones that I'm very, very curious about. Some of them I had heard about before, some of them I had not, some of them I want to know absolutely nothing about until I actually read them, and some I have a very good idea of what is going to happen. So first up we have Persephone Station by Stina Leicht. So this is one that just came out in January and I have been desperate to get my hands on, despite the fact that I know almost nothing about it. So I think that this is a sort of Western type space opera. And it takes place on Persephone Station, which is a seemingly backwater planet that has been largely ignored by the kind of republic that has been created between all of these planets. So we follow a character named Rosie, And her bar, Monk's Bar, caters to wannabe criminals and the rich earther tourists that sort of, you know, come and hang out at this planet. However, there are two types of people that hang out in the back bar. Members of a rather exclusive class and those who seek to employ them. So that's really all I know. I'm not going to read the rest of the description because I don't want to know the rest of it. I think that this sounds amazing though. This sounds like exactly my cup of tea and I'm slightly obsessed with this cover. It's absolutely stunning. I have heard some people who have read this have absolutely loved it. I'm really looking forward to it. It's going to be so good. Then I bought The Winter Duke by Claire Eliza Bartlett. This sounds really fun. I think this came out, this is Titan Books, yeah, in the UK last year, and it just kind of totally passed me by. I didn't hear about it until it actually came out, and it's been on my radar ever since. So this is a book that follows a character who just desperately wants to kind of stay alive and prove her sort of worth as a scholar. So once her brother is named the heir of their dukedom, there's going to be nothing that can keep her at home, and she's kind of desperate for this to happen. However, of course, her brother and her entire family fall under the control of this mysterious sleeping sickness. Overnight, she is named Duke, and she sort of inherits everything, including the title, her brother's captivating warrior bride, and an ever-encroaching challengers from without and within her ministry. So nothing has prepared her for diplomacy or love or war, but she has to kind of rise above and seize her family's magic and power. This sounds great. This sounds amazing. This is like the perfect thing to kind of like throw a duvet over my head and like build a little blanket fort and read while I'm feeling sad or something like that. I think this is going to be really great, and from what I have heard, it's a very fun read. And then, after trying to find this book for ages and ages and ages, because it was always sold out, I finally got my hands on Cemetery Boys by Aidan Thomas. This was a huge YA release last year. Everyone has been raving about it. It's a totally hyped up book, which I usually try to avoid, but I think this is going to be a lovely book. So, in this book, we follow a character named Yadriel, who is determined to prove himself as a brujo, which is a sort of witch, someone who wields this kind of magic and looks after the dead, and he is a trans man, and the kind of magic is very gendered, and his family is not very accepting of his new identity, and while trying to kind of perform the rites to become a brujo on his own, he ends up setting out to find the ghost of his murdered cousin and set it free. However, the ghost he summons is accidentally Julian Diaz, who is the school's resident bad boy and is not about to go into his death quietly, and is determined to find out what happened and tie up some loose ends before he leaves. So, sort of not left with much choice, Yadriel decides to help Julian, and they can both get what they want. This sounds really fun. I'm really excited for this. It takes place in Los Angeles, which is where I'm from, although granted a very different part of Los Angeles, and I'm super pumped for this. I've heard such good things. I have heard that I will love it, and I'm really looking forward to this. I know I say that for every book, but I really am looking forward to this. So for me, it's a little bit unusual to stumble upon something that sounds really interesting, that's fairly new, that I haven't heard of. But that was the case with The Monsters of Rookhaven. This is by Padraig Kenny. This is also an illustrated book. So we have like pages like this, and then we also have some illustrations on like the pages with text as well. So this looks like a stunningly beautiful book, and I'm very intrigued by this. So, in this book, we have a character named Mirabelle, who lives in a house called Rookhaven that has this magical glamour protecting it, and her unusual family from the human world. However, an orphaned brother and sister stumble upon Rookhaven when that kind of veil is torn, and she discovers that it is possible to make friends with people from the outside world. But the tear between two worlds has let danger in, and an evil begins to stalk Mirabelle and her family, and it quickly becomes clear that the true monsters aren't necessarily the ones you can see. This sounds amazing. This sounds right up my alley, and I had never heard of it before. before, or if I have, it just didn't like ping on my radar. So I'm really looking forward to sort of diving into this knowing as little as possible, and I think it's going to be amazing. I get some really, really good spooky gothic-y vibes from this. Then I have Among the Beasts and Briars by Ashley Poston. She is the author of the Geekerella series, which I absolutely love, and I've never read any of her speculative fiction before. So she has a sci-fi duology, and I believe this is her first fantasy novel, and I'm really looking forward to it. So this is giving me some serious Uprooted vibes, which I am totally here for because I love Uprooted. It's one of my favorite books. So in this book, we follow a girl named Karis, and she lives in a kingdom that has been prospering and flourishing for hundreds of years, ever since the king made a deal with the Lady of the Woods to kind of like keep his land safe. And as his land is prospering, the woods are kind of becoming darker and darker. So everyone stays out of the woods, but Karis sort of knows the danger of the woods all too well, because when she was young, she barely escaped with her life as the woods killed her friends and her mother, and now she kind of carries a magical taint in her blood that always reminds her of what happened. However, a new queen is crowned, and things long hidden in the woods begin to descend on the kingdom itself. So Karis is forced to run with her only companion, a small and irritating fox from the royal garden, which sounds amazing. And she has to find the legendary Lady of the Woods to beg to save her home. This sounds great. I'm so excited for this. I know that this didn't have a huge amount of kind of hype and buzz, at least not over here when it came out, but it's one I'm so excited for. I love anything that has like an enchanted and cursed wood in it. And it sounds like it's going to be sort of similar vibes to the wood from Uprooted, which was my favorite part of that book. So this is one I'm really looking forward to. The next book that I have is one that I picked up because of a booktuber. I can't really remember who it was. I think it was Brightness Katie though, because she read it and it looked like a lot of fun. I've also seen this cover floating around a lot, and it's a fantasy romance, which you just don't really get very often in terms of like straight up romance that happens to be set in a fantasy world. So this is From Blood and Ash by Jennifer L. Armentrout. This looks like so much fun. So in this book we have a character named Poppy, and her life has never been her own because the life of the maiden is solitary, never to be touched, never to be looked upon or spoken to, and never to experience pleasure. And she's waiting for the day of her ascension, and she would rather be with the guards fighting back the evil that took her family rather than preparing to be found worthy of the gods. But that choice has never been hers. Enter Hawk, with an E at the end, who is a member of her honor guard, who is bound to ensure her ascension, and when he enters her life, destiny and duty become entangled with desire and need. Yes, this sounds great. I'm really looking forward to this, and I think this is a trilogy. I know the second book is out, but I think the third one is either coming out soon or is out already. This looks great. I'm so pumped. And then we have a novella. This is Over the Woodward Wall by A. Deborah Baker, also known as Shauna McGuire. This is sort of like Tales from the Hinterland was the book that tied into The Hazelwood. This is the book that ties into Middle Game, which is one of my favorite books of last year. I absolutely adored it. I totally flipped for that book, and when I found out that there was kind of the accompanying fairy tale story, I was so excited. So I have been waiting to buy this book with that pound per book savings, because normally I don't really justify buying hardback novellas, but this one seemed like it was going to be worth it. So in this book, we have two children. We have Avery and Zib. They're both exceptional in their own ways. So everything that Avery does is precise, from the way he washes his face and his hands in the morning to the way that he completes his homework. Zib is an exceptional child in a way that cannot be measured in the same way as Avery. So they live on the same street. They live in kind of different worlds, and on an unplanned detour from home to school one morning, they find themselves climbing over a stone wall to the up and under, an impossible land filled with mystery, adventure, and strange creatures. So this is the book in Middle Game that's written by the alchemist, who kind of kickstarts all of the events of Middle Game, and you get passages of this book sort of floating throughout that book. There's also a sequel to this coming out later this year that I just found out out about in January, and I'm really, really excited. I love the middle game worlds, and I'm really excited to read this because anything that'll just get me back into that world is going to be great. Next up is a self-published book, which is not something that I usually end up hauling for no reason other than there's so much choice out there, and I don't have as good a kind of eye on self-publishing as I do on traditional publishing, but I have had this on my radar for a very long time. I think I'm gonna love it. The author seems like a really, really cool dude. This is Never Die by Rob J. Hayes. One of my good friends who has the absolute opposite taste in books as me really didn't enjoy this and said that I would love it because of that. So I'm really looking forward to this based on her kind of like wonky recommendation. So in this book, we follow a 8-year-old boy who has been murdered, and he is on a mission from the god of death. He's going to bring down the emperor. He knows he can't do this alone, so he is going to find sort of legendary heroes and kill them so they can join him. So he has these 4 heroes in mind, names from storybooks read to him by his father, and now he must find them and kill them so he can bring them back to fight this war. That sounds great. I'm so excited for this. I think it's a trilogy, and I think the last book, or like the most recent book in this series, came out recently, so I'm very, very much looking forward to this and diving into the land of self-publishing, which is not a place that I venture very often, but I would really, really like to. And the last book from that pound per book haul is the omnibus of the Ambergris series by Jeff Vandermeer. So this contains City of Saints and Madmen, Shriek, and Finch. So it's 3 of his books bound up in one copy. I don't know a huge amount about these, but I really liked this edition and I really enjoy his books. I think that this is going to be really amazing. So these he wrote more than 20 years ago before Annihilation, which is his big, big famous book that I actually didn't really get on with, and I'm going to give another try at some point now that I kind of have an idea of what I'm getting myself into with his books. But this has kind of like become a cult classic of a trilogy, and I'm very much looking forward to this. I absolutely love his books. They're so weird and so bizarre, but really, really fun. Okay, so now that is over. That's my pound per book haul. I probably should have done a separate video for those because there's so many. But now we're moving on to my Goldsboro SFF Fellowship books. So for December, we have Ready Player 2 by Ernest Cline. I'm not gonna lie, I am really not pleased with having a copy of this book. I hated Ready Player 1, like the 20 pages that I managed to read, because it's just so like, if you could pick like tropes and things that Justine hates, they would all be contained in that book. So Scottish Husband's gonna read this because he enjoyed that, and then maybe, I don't know what he thinks of it, I'll unhaul it or something, but I'm not particularly thrilled at having a beautiful copy of that book. The other one that I have, the January book, I'm much more excited for. So this is actually a Star Wars book. This is Light of the Jedi by Charles Soule. This is one of the new canon books, and I've not read a ton of them, but I'm very, very curious about this because it takes place in kind of a different age from any of the Star Wars books that I've read. So this is kind of the golden age of the Republic and of the Jedi. Worlds flourish under the benevolent leadership of the Senate and peace reigns. And there's this group of Force users called Jedi. So at the height of their power, free citizens of the galaxy are confident in their ability to weather any storm. But even the brightest light can cast a shadow, and some storms defy any proportion. So there's a huge catastrophe in hyperspace that tears a ship to pieces, and the shrapnel is emerging and going to threaten disaster for an entire system. So no sooner does the call go out for help as the Jedi race to the scene, and this sort of, the scope of this disaster pushes them to their limit as the sky breaks open and destruction rains down upon the peaceful alliance they hope to build. The Jedi must trust the Force to see them through the day without a single mistake that could cost billions of lives. This sounds really fun, and I think one of the reasons that this does sound super, super fun, I'm not always keen on Star Wars books, even though I bought a ton of them in December, as you may remember from my haul. I find that sometimes the sort of individuals that it follows aren't as interesting, and those storylines aren't as interesting as the big scope of the Star Wars films, but I feel like this is gonna have that scope because it's a bunch of Jedi, it's this big disaster that they're trying to avert, and it sounds really interesting, so I'm very, very intrigued by this one. If you've read it, definitely let me know. Okay, so last but not least, we have a smattering of other books. So first up, I have Pocketful of Crows and The Blue Salt Road by Joanne M. Harris. I have already read these. I read them on NetGalley when they first came out, but these are her sort of novellas that are based on the child ballads, which is English oral tradition folklore. These are fabulous. I really, really, really love these. The Blue Salt Road follows a Selkie, but it's kind of gender swapped because usually in those stories it's a man stealing a female Selkie's skin and forcing him to be his wife. In this, it's the opposite. A woman steals a male Selkie's skin and he has to kind of like integrate into human society and begins to forget who he is. And then we have Pocketful of Crows, which follows a beautiful young kind of wild forest maiden who falls in love with a prince, and he sort of uses her and spurns her, and she ends up getting her revenge. Both of these are fabulous. Orphea is the most recent one, which I have on my shelf. I wanted to complete the collection, and these are all gonna look really good together. Then I was gifted for Christmas a copy of Red, White, and Royal Blue by Casey McQuiston. So this is one that I'm sure everyone knows about. It was huge, huge, huge on BookTube last year when it came out, and her new release I think is getting a lot of hype as well. But basically this is the Prince of England and the son of the US president falling in love and having a relationship, and it's super cute. I think if you're super precious about like how the British monarchy works, you're probably not gonna like this. I know a lot of British people were like, that's not how it works, but that's like standard for every romance novel, so like I'm fine, I don't mind. This sounds really fun, it sounds really silly. It's not normally my usual kind of thing, but I've been thinking about giving it a try for a while, so Catherine really hit the nail on the head when she got us this copy. Then I have Kingdom of Souls by Raina Barron. This is a big release from I think 2019, and the sequel is coming out really soon, so I decided to use some of my book buying budget for the month of January, which by the way, I was 21p under budget for January. I think you should all be very proud of me. And I decided to go ahead and pick this up in anticipation of the next book. So this is I think it's a West African YA fantasy, and it follows a girl who is sort of the product of two incredibly powerful lines of witch doctors. However, she has no magic, and she is determined to force magic to manifest, because when you reach a certain age, if you don't have magic yet, you're never gonna get it. But she desperately, desperately wants it, and she's going to sort of do some very dangerous things in order to get it. This sounds great. I heard really, really mixed reviews when it did come out, but it's one that I've been very, very intrigued by, and I have really been enjoying West African inspired YA fantasy. And then last but not least is a book I already talked about in my January wrap-up, so I won't touch on it much here. This is Sapiens, the graphic novel by Yuval Noah Harari. This is a graphic novel adaptation of his very, 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 very well-respected and well-known like nonfiction book, and it dives into a lot of those concepts, but in a little bit more of a non-sciencey friendly way. The one thing I did find about this is that the way it's presented is very much kind of for children. There's like superheroes and comics and, you know, flashing back in time and TV shows and things like that, but what the actual words and concepts are, I think, are a little bit complicated. So I don't think this is great for kids, but maybe for like teenagers and up. I did enjoy it. I thought that some of it was a little bit sort of dizzying. So I ended up giving it 4 out of 5 stars. However, I do think that like the history and the concepts that he does go into are really interesting and really complex, and I don't think he could have simplified them much more than he already did. So that is my January book haul. I'm losing my voice as I always do at the end of book hauls because I tend to bring in a ton of stuff and have a ton of stuff to talk to you guys about. But I would love to know what you hauled in the month of January, if you've read any of these books, if you have anywhere you'd recommend that I start, and also you can go ahead and cheer me on for my TBR because I'm hoping to lower that number from 826 to something even slightly lower next month, but we'll have to wait and see. I post bookish content to this channel fairly frequently, so go ahead and hit subscribe, check back soon, and I will see you next time.